The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
And Governor Morrissey is suing the NCAA over the snub of the Mountaineers.
You are Locked On West Virginia, your daily podcast on the West Virginia Mountaineers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm going to go over some of the notes and things that I wrote down during Governor Morrissey's press conference, where they are challenging the NCAA ruling on, or whatever you want to call it, the NCAA committee's ruling on the West Virginia Mountaineers being left out in favor of North Carolina of the NCAA tournament. He started out by saying 111 of 111 brackets predicting the Mountaineers to go into the tournament. The first time in history that all 111 are predicting a team to go in had been wrong. Talked about the quad one wins, which we all know we had 6 of, undefeated versus the 3 and 4 quad 3 and 4 teams. He called this, quote, a miscarriage of justice, and, quote, robbery at the highest levels. He said it stinks. He brought up North Carolina and Bubba Cunningham and how he's pulled off a miracle 2 years in a row, which is very true, by being in the room, the AD of North Carolina and the head of the committee. $70,000 bonus for Bubba Cunningham if West Virginia or North Carolina were to get in. This stinks. This stinks. Reeks of corruption, according to Governor Morrissey. He did note that they want to be collaborative with the NCAA. They want to work with the NCAA. He feels like this could be, are we left to feel like this could be retribution for 2023 regarding the Raekwon battle rulings? I don't know. He's going to launch an investigation into bribes, backroom deals, and more. Did it happen? Did Bubba Cunningham smooth or grease a couple palms to get Carolina into the tournament? Or was this simply the NCAA saying, look, we realize that West Virginia is no small brand, but they're not North Carolina. And so it's better for everybody if Carolina plays in the tournament. Guys, I learned some things I didn't know in that press conference. I didn't know Bubba Cunningham had a $70,000, and I get it. These are rich men. Is $70,000 a lot to the AD at North Carolina? No, but $70,000 is $70,000. That is a small house. That is a very nice luxury car. That is an inheritance. That is a lot of different things. And if you think that it's not important to somebody that wealthy, I got news for you. That's just not the truth, flat out. This is insanity. West Virginia was screwed. We know that. We got Dick Vitale. You've got Jeff Goodman. You've got even Dan Dockich, who was an Indiana guy. And Indiana has a gripe too, just about as big as West Virginia. It's close, right? So there are teams that have gripes in this scenario. I don't know what else to say other than that. We're used to this. I think people have called me crazy a couple times on the show for saying that we are abused as a program, that no, everybody goes through it. I truly believe there's something about West Virginia that a lot of, people hate at the top, especially, for multiple different reasons that I can say. We get looked over. Even when we were in the Big East, the only time that we had a chance to actually land safely, we beat ourselves in a game versus Pitt. We were actually in a spot at number 2 to go to the national championship game. But that was after several years of winning 10 and 11 games, right? So we had to get there. We got there to that point. in this scenario, you've got a first-year coach that took upon an entire new roster with losing 35 points a game, Stone and DeVries. And you mean to tell me that 23 games later, the excuse for West Virginia not getting into the NCAA tournament is Tucker DeVries, who hadn't played since game 8? That right there lets you know that this stinks to high heaven, just like they said. It was literally, it was what they did to Florida State, except illegitimate. Like, I actually saw their side against Florida State, although I still feel like Florida State got screwed, but it was because they obviously lost their best player. West Virginia didn't lose Tucker DeVries in January. He lost, they might have lost, I think it might have been 20. It was almost 2024 when this happened. $68,000 richer because North Carolina got in the tournament. You can't, it's the biggest conflict of interest that you can think of, right? Let's put the people that stand to gain and benefit from certain things happening in charge. Surely to God, that can't be how this works. This billion-dollar industry can't be set up like this, can it? People have known about this. I didn't know that this kind of thing was happening. I thought this would be something you would vet ahead of time. Okay, you don't have any benefits for your team getting in your contract, you can be on the chair or whatever. You mean to tell me that North Carolina AD was allowed to head up the committee with the $68,000 bonus on the line for his team to get in? And then we're told that by people that was in the room that it wasn't done with the most integrity. When is it going to stop falling on us? A state that has so frustrating. Let me take a quick breath here. When is it going to stop happening to us? A state that has very little else to look forward to. We have no pro teams. We have literally nothing else. And thankfully, the women are in the tournament, and that's great. I'm proud of them, and I'm going to be rooting for them, and I'm going to follow that. It doesn't have the same impact as the men would, unfortunately. I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way. It's just the truth. You know, the state kind of lives and dies with what the men's teams do, right? You know, it's just a little bit higher of a level. I'm sure. Could the women catch fire and do some awesome stuff in the tournament and get us all really excited? Yeah, they could. I'm not saying they can't. But there are those of us that we're dreaming about, that dream about every single day, West Virginia, someday winning it, the whole thing, you know. And I hate it for this team. I hate it for Javon Small. I hate it for Tucker and Darren and everybody that put all in the effort. I can think back to when Darren DeVries was swamped when he first got to West Virginia, all by himself with no coaching staff trying to put this thing together. Feels like we're cursed sometimes. It really does.
Seeded SEC team. That happened last year. Yale got the W that time, so I think we'll see a very similar situation. Texas A&M, the 4 seed here, a program that is really good despite missing so many shots. Like, they miss so many shots. Their offense is not particularly efficient, but they are very, very good on the glass. Buzz Williams' team, when Wade Taylor's not shooting well, they can struggle a little bit offensively. We've seen that before. Zurich Phelps is great, but I just think Yale has the personality. James Jones, phenomenal coach. Again, a lot of the guys are back from a team that did this last year, so I think they're ready for this. I think we've seen A&M be inconsistent, and I think if they don't come out firing and having a great game, I would not be surprised to see Yale do exactly what they did last year once again.
All right, we're going Ivy League. Great stuff. Appreciate it.
Hey, Kylan, do you remember who led Yale to that win over Auburn last year?
What? Who? Where?
Danny Wolf, now at Michigan.
Right,
Full
exactly.
circle
The
with this
Ivy
thing.
League transfer. I love it. We're bringing it.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Texas and Xavier will meet for the third time in program history tomorrow night in the first four. The winner will move on to the round of 64 to play Illinois on Friday. To preview the matchup, here is part one of my conversation with Xavier beat writer Shelby Dermer. Joining us now to talk about this Wednesday's first four matchup between the Texas Longhorns and the Xavier Musketeers. He is Shelby Dermer, who covers the Xavier basketball program for the Cincinnati Enquirer, and he's nice enough to give us a few minutes to talk about this week's game. Shelby, thanks so much for the time, man. How are you today?
Brad, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great. I think both of us are in a similar boat, right? Selection Sunday was scary, a little anxious. But obviously, both of our teams end up making it into the NCAA tournament. I want to start right there. How surprised, or were you surprised at all, that Xavier did hear its name called on Selection Sunday?
Couple of elements to that, Brad, and maybe not so surprised that they got the bid. My surprise really came from that there was that two-team cushion with San Diego State and North Carolina. I mean, you're Xavier fans everywhere, and of course, media too. Watching the games on Sunday, particularly that Memphis UAB matchup, and Memphis trailing at halftime, and Joe Lunardi comes on and says, hey, Xavier's the last team in. If Memphis can come back and win, they're the first team out if Memphis were to lose, and UAB is that bid stealer. But, going into the 3-day, 2.5-day wait Xavier had after losing to Marquette in that thrilling matchup at Madison Square Garden in the Big East Tournament quarterfinals, you had a lot of things really break Xavier's way. And, the Big East had a spotlight on it this time around because last year the bid stealers really impacted the bubble. And the Big East felt that with Providence, Seton Hall, and St. John's all having pretty strong resumes to get in the tournament. And all of them were left out. Providence went to the NIT. Seton Hall ended up winning the NIT. Rick Pitino said no thanks. So Xavier had a lot of things break their way Saturday, and then especially Sunday with VCU taking out George Mason, another potential bid stealer in the A-10 at Capital One Arena in D.C., and then, of course, that Memphis game that I just mentioned. So if you're looking at FanDuel odds, I know Indiana fans don't want to talk about that with where their odds were at going into Selection Sunday, but as soon as Memphis started pulling away in the second half of that matchup, Xavier's odds on FanDuel at least were climbing up into the minus 350, closing in on almost minus 400 to make the NCAA tournament. So you had to feel pretty good. But the fact that they had that two-team cushion and they were the third two teams below them in the last four in was a surprising factor for sure.
Yeah, Shelby, tell us a little bit about the Xavier team. 21-11 this year, 13-7 in the Big East, which was tied for fourth in the conference. What are some of the strengths and maybe some of the weaknesses for this Musketeers team that the Longhorns are going to see on Wednesday?
Well, the committee won't take into consideration, and I think Sean Miller said this yesterday when he was talking about his playing days at Pitt, the last 10 games, how you were playing going into the tournament was always a factor. This time around, it's not as big of a factor, but certainly every coach wants to be playing their best basketball in the all-important months of February and March, and Xavier's been doing that. 12 of their last 16 games they won. They went 12-3 to end the regular season, a big 7-game winning streak where now looking back, if they have any slip-up in conference play, it may have cost them an at-large bid. So definitely playing their best basketball as the tournament comes around, which is what you want to do. So that's definitely a strength. They're getting some bench production from Jerome Hunter, a veteran who was on the Sweet 16 team 2 years ago, and Dante Maddox. I know Xavier fans really think he seems like a guy who's going to come into March Madness and take fans by storm with the way he can shoot the three and the way he's kind of been up and down off the bench. So those are definitely some strengths. Some weaknesses for Xavier is that some tight games this season, they've come up short, and especially games where they could have won. And that's why, if they weren't picked yesterday, it would have been a big season of what-ifs just continuing because their last two trips to Madison Square Garden, they had double-digit second-half leads against St. John's and Marquette. You win both of those, you're not worried about the bubble very much.
Right.
They cough up both of those big leads, and now they kind of had to sweat on Selection Sunday. So playing with the lead, keeping the lead, playing a full 40-minute effort, as Sean Miller said several times in press conferences, is definitely a concern going in Xavier's ability to finish off games.
Yeah, you talked about that 7-game win streak to cap off the regular season, right? What changed? I know you mentioned bench production. Maybe that's a part of it, but what started working more for Xavier that got them off the bubble and actually into the tournament?
Well, for starters, the schedule kind of eased up.
Yeah.
And that was one thing where Xavier played such a front-loaded Big East schedule, and they were in a bunch of tight games, lost a lot of close games, pulled out some big wins in there, thinking at Marquette, that's the only quad one win on the resume, 59-57, going up to Pfizer Forum and holding that Marquette offense to just 57 points was big. They come back home and beat UConn at home at Cintas Center in a big environment. That was a close game. But then over that 7-game winning streak, they got to play Butler twice. They beat Providence twice. They came back home and played DePaul. Their last 6 games, they had 4 of them at home. And then one of those away games was just west in Butler in Indianapolis. So not a lot of travel. They got to rest a little bit, stayed at home. And it wasn't one thing just to beat the bottom teams of the Big East, but they did it convincingly. Over that 7-game winning streak, they won those games by 12.7 points per game, and that includes a 22-point drubbing of Creighton, which is a pretty impressive feat to pull off with how Creighton is always in March Madness, and they got a pretty tough draw against Louisville in the first round. So I think that was the biggest change for Xavier, and I think location of the game coming up on Wednesday is something you might touch on with how close it is to Cincinnati, but staying at home and really handling its business. And then maybe the other thing, like you mentioned, I talked about bench production, but Zach Freemantle coming back, that front-loaded Big East schedule got even harder when you have to go at UConn to Hartford and then come home and play Marquette without your best player, your leading scorer and rebounder. And they lose to UConn in overtime in Hartford at XL Center. UConn was ranked at the time. Then they come back home, play a Marquette team, lose by 2 on a controversial play at the buzzer when they come back and rally in that game. So the schedule eases up. Zach Freemantle comes back, and Xavier kind of becomes this well-oiled machine that played its best ball in March.
Shelby Dermer of the Cincinnati Enquirer joining us here talking Texas and Xavier. Yeah, you bring up the name Zach Freemantle. Shelby, I feel like that guy has been in college basketball since I was wearing diapers. I mean, he has been around the block a time or two. Was on the roster when Texas and Xavier met in the Sweet 16 in 2023, but he was hurt, so he didn't play in that game. Talk about Zach Freemantle and why he's such a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses.
Yeah, well, he's shown the ability to step out behind the arc and hit threes, but just down low, it seems like he's been sizzling as of late. I mean, he was in over 20 points the last 3 games in the regular season. He had another strong showing, after a slow start against Marquette. That kind of really turned into Ryan Conwell's show with 38 points in that matchup, but Zach was great too, except a crucial missed dunk in the second half that would have put Xavier up 6 with, I think, less than 10 minutes to go. And so, yeah, he's been the biggest story for Xavier just last year. He and Jerome Hunter, who did play in that Texas game in the Sweet 16, they both missed last year, and Xavier could not handle the front court injuries. This year, Xavier lost its starting center, Lucina Traore, to a torn ACL back in October, and it was up to Zach, Jerome, a little bit of John Hughley coming off the bench to kind of carry that weight down low for an undersized Xavier team. Fremantle's the tallest guy on the roster, just 6'9". So he's an undersized 5. He would have been the starting 4 had Traore not been hurt. So he's stepped up and played very physical. And I think defense was the question mark. Not a lot of people talk about Zach Fremantle's defense because he was such an offensive weapon for Xavier, and that's what he was known for. But he's playing some of the best defense of his career too.
Seeded SEC team. That happened last year. Yale got the W that time, so I think we'll see a very similar situation. Texas A&M, the 4 seed here, a program that is really good despite missing so many shots. Like they miss so many shots. Their offense is not particularly efficient, but they are very, very good on the glass. Buzz Williams' team, when Wade Taylor's not shooting well, they can struggle a little bit offensively. We've seen that before. Zurich Phelps is great, but I just think Yale has the personality. James Jones, phenomenal coach. Again, a lot of the guys are back from a team that did this last year, so I think they're ready for this. I think we've seen A&M be inconsistent, and I think if they don't come out firing and having a great game, I would not be surprised to see Yale do exactly what they did last year once again.
All right, we're going Ivy League. Great stuff. Appreciate it.
Hey, Kylan, do you remember who led Yale to that win over Auburn last year?
What? Who? Where?
Danny Wolf, now at Michigan.
Right,
Full
exactly.
circle
The
with this
Ivy
thing.
League transfer. I love it. We're bringing
Alex Jensen made a strong first impression in his introductory press conference as the new head coach of the Utah men's basketball team.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes.
The Alex Jensen introductory press conference, anytime your team introduces a new head coach at a major sport like basketball, we got to start with that first. I thought it was a really strong impression. I honestly did come away stronger like from Jensen. We just haven't gotten to hear him talk a ton as an NBA assistant coach. So I thought it was great to hear him talk. I always felt like he was the right guy for this job, but listening to him like cemented that feeling. And I am really excited about the future. I thought he proved like, yeah, he's the right guy for this job.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there's only so much you can say in a press conference, right? You gotta talk the talk and then you gotta walk the walk. But I think that he said all the right things today. We kind of got a little bit more of an insight onto his vision for the team and what he's trying to put together for next season and beyond too, right? Like the vision for the future of this program, in terms of how they're going to recruit, how they're going to, treat the players, how they're going to run this ship top to bottom, right? So it was good to kind of get a little more insight on that.
How do you feel about that vision? I'm excited about it, but do you think that's the right vision for this Utah men's basketball program?
I mean, yeah, I think, he mentioned that he wants to build a hard-nosed defensive team that, pays attention to the little things, right? Dot your I's and cross your T's, and make sure that they're a team that nobody wants to face, right? You never want an opponent going into a game saying, oh, yeah, they'll be, this will be easy. Oh, yeah, we can just do this and this and this, and we'll cruise to a win. You want the Utes to be able to put out counters to people, have guys that always play hard and know where to be on the floor, and I think that's a really good idea. So
I think that could really serve Utah specifically well too, because I already think Utah has an advantage, as we talk about all the time with even the other sports, the altitude. Like it's an advantage to come here. And I think one of the reasons in the past, not this year, we saw the football team be so good at home is because teams get fatigued and tired and they make mistakes. There's always a lot of penalties and things of that nature. If Utah can just be a tough defensive team that causes turnovers, disrupts, and doesn't beat themselves, Ethan, tell me if I'm wrong. I think that's actually just going to give you a lot of wins, especially they were good at home this last year. They could be even better overall just because of what a good home court advantage it is playing in Utah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely true, right? If you can tire an opposing team out, they're just by nature, they're going to move a little slower. Their brain's not going to work quite as fast, right? So, the Utes have this home court advantage using the altitude, right? We've seen the Jazz, implement kind of similar strategies in the past, just kind of using that to your advantage as much as you can. Denver, the Nuggets have had a great home court advantage in the NBA over the past couple of years, and that's part of because they have good players too. But I think that leaning into that is definitely smart.
Yeah, this road, look, BYU, obviously I wish Utah had the best basketball program in the state. Right now it's the Cougars, but the fact that BYU is already good, and if Utah can be good, those two teams can help each other out a lot in the regular season just by making it a gauntlet to come out here. Yeah. And then hopefully we can also beat up on BYU, obviously, as we try to improve and get some things right too. But when talking about like the most interesting things he said, and I'll just say favorite, maybe not most interesting, but I really liked when he said, hey, I can't be Rick Majerus. But he said the players and other coaches will react to him and respect him being genuine. And I absolutely agree with that, as we got a little cat cameo coming in as well here for our audio listeners. But yeah, but I really like that. Like just saying like, hey, I can't be Rick Majerus. Like, is that how I expect him to approach it? Of course. But that is 1000% the right mindset to take. And I think there are so many people that I've heard want us to get back to those days. And that's fair. You can want us to get back to making the tournament every year. I think Final Four NCAA championship's a lofty expectation, but just like being consistently there. But you have to do it differently if you want to have that success. And I do feel confident in Alex Jensen being the guy who can do it differently and have that success. So I really like that quote.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, obviously Rick Majerus is going to be a big part of this conversation, right? Because not only did Jensen play under Rick Majerus, he coached with him for a couple of years there after his playing career. So Majerus is clearly kind of his mentor and a guy that he's built a lot of his basketball philosophy around. But another thing that I really liked that Alex said was about how he's going to have to evolve back to the college game as the college game is evolving itself. He thinks that the college game is kind of getting a little more similar to the NBA as the years go on, and things ebb and flow and change, but with the emphasis on, shooting a lot more threes, getting higher quality shots, more things in the paint and from the 3-point line. But the game is always going to continue to change, both on and off the court, right? With the NIL thing and the stylistic differences in the different leagues that you're playing against, and all these different teams that have, pushed the game forward year after year. So I think it's smart to really want to adapt with the times and try to just always stay on your toes, because basketball never stays the same. It's always going to be different year after year.
It changes so much. The game evolves, it adapts, and Jensen seems like a guy who's ready to that. I mean, he deals with that at the NBA. I mean, a grueling 82-game regular season schedule, a ton of just travel fit in between that as well. So he's someone who's been through a lot and feels like he's definitely ready for this moment. And it felt like the energy in the building was really good. Ethan, would you say the same?
I think so. Yeah. I was there in person. Good amount of, university pillars there, people that have been around the team in the university and stuff. And a few of them got to speak to the crowd, and, a good sized contingent of Utah fans there, giving out some t-shirts and stuff. It was a good vibe in the building.
I felt like I like the decision to go make it public, make it a celebration. That's what it is. And it's also just still and we'll talk about this. I just cannot believe that Utah still has games to play while all this was going on too. It's
Crazy.
just, it's a wild situation with all of this that's happening. But Ethan, one thing obviously Jensen hopes to do is get Utah back to the lofty pedestal it was back in the 90s. So when yesterday we saw the Field of 68 get released, there was no controversy whatsoever, as there never is with that, obviously, right? Too. So, but one thing, the question then becomes like, hey, the reason you get Alex Jensen is because you want to be a team that gets back in there. I do think Utah will get in there. Now, it's obviously very early because they haven't added anyone on this roster. But Ethan, I do want to ask you this. Agree or disagree? I would be surprised if sometime in the next 2 seasons, Utah wasn't in the field.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's been a clear, message from the university this offseason. It seems like they are really wanting to push this team back into contention. And that's with, Alex Jensen accepting the job, the decision to move on from Craig Smith early, right, with still games left in the season. I think that this, and also, with the new arena being built, potentially getting that up and running here in a couple of years. So I think that it seems to me like university management is really focused on making men's basketball a priority again, because it's really just been a lot of like football. The women's team has been doing really well. And then the men's, they haven't had success in almost 10 years. So I just think that there's a reinvigoration of this program. Hopefully, some more money and things like that coming in to build a competitive team. But I'm with you. I do think that they will try their damn hardest to make March Madness within the next couple of years. And if they don't, that would probably be a pretty big disappointment.
It would be a big disappointment. I definitely think, like I said, do I think this team's going to make it next year? Like, just genuinely prediction. Maybe it's riding the vibes right now. Like, I do think they will. But if they won't, I won't be disappointed, because it's like, it's his first year, only our second year in the Big 12. Like, this is tough to do. So I think by year 3, if they hadn't made it, is when I'd be disappointed probably. But I just genuinely do think sometime in the next 2 years, it'll click and it'll work. There seems to be a lot of excitement. Everything about the NIL, the revenue sharing, leads me to believe in this team. And there's even other coaching potential news and rumors and hires that are still leaving us hopefully optimistic for that future as well.